Welcome to another episode where I answer your questions. So let's not waste time and let's get started. So the first question is from Sonia Vincent. What is the best way to get yourself out of yearning, grasping, chasing, obsessing mode when you've wanted something way too long? It's got a hold of you and you want to unhook and allow, but you don't know how. That rhymes, so good job, Sonia. Well, first it's understanding what is it that you see in having that. So if you're chasing, obsessing, most times that has to do with a relationship, but it could very easily be about money. It could be about a job. If I had a relationship with this person, then I would feel blank, blank, blank. If I had this money, then I would feel blank, blank, blank. If you can start to understand what is the essence of the outcome that you perceive you would have if you had that thing outside of you. So what you want to start seeing is, I am not that unless I have it. And so if you know that you are basically getting a reflection of who you're being, the accumulation of your assumptions and beliefs, if you start to understand, oh, okay, I keep finding not the thing because I feel like I have to have the thing in order to feel that way. For instance, let me clarify this a little bit more. I will feel safe and I will have freedom if I can manifest $100,000. If I don't have $100,000, then I can't feel safe or free. So if I right now do not feel safe and secure and free, I will continue to manifest, I continue to materialize that perception of myself in the world. I will see through the lens of, I am not safe, I don't feel secure, I don't feel free, so I'll feel limited, I'll feel like I'm in lack because I don't have this money. But because I don't feel those feelings inside of me, because I don't see myself as that inversion of me and start to understand, okay, well, how would I move in the world? Okay, if I felt secure right now, what would that feel like? What would it be like? What would I believe about myself if I felt secure? So starting to understand that you're yearning, you're grasping, you're obsessing is trying to get your needs met. But the way that you perceive that that thing has to happen in order for me to start feeling those things, that's where the distortion happens. And especially if you were raised in an environment where your caregivers didn't acknowledge your experience, where it was you're supposed to be, a child is seen, not heard, or your emotional experience was just completely ignored. Maybe there was a lot of stress in the environment that you were growing up where you had to leave your needs in order to stay part of the unit. So starting to understand, oh, what was my early on experience of having my needs met, of getting what I wanted? If it was that you couldn't have it, you had to wait for somebody's permission, you could be recreating that with the money. Something outside of me has to happen so that I have my needs met. The more you start to understand what is the essence of the outcome, the more and more that you can start to tap into that, recognize, okay, if it's about security, if it's about freedom, where in your life right now do you already have that? Even if it's the smallest sense of it, it can really help to show you that you can have it, you feel it, and the more and more you put attention on that, the more that can build. Being that person now is what will draw those things in. That thing outside of you is not what gives you those feelings. Those feelings inside of you is what draws in the experience and allows you to have that space and interact and attract in that same level of being. So the second question comes from Lizio XO, and the question is, what to do when everything you try feels like a failure? It's really important to understand what failure is, what meaning you have on that. So if you're a failure, if you fail at something, does it mean you're not good enough? Does it mean that you're not going to have your needs met, that no one's going to like you, that if they found out that you failed so many times, then everybody in your life would leave if they knew the real you? For one, understand that every success is paved in failed attempts, in attempts that weren't quite there. But in the failure is the seed of the wisdom that you need to succeed. Well, as you can see, that a failure is not a fatality, it's not the final potential, it's not an indication of your potential and power, but is there a fear of what will happen if you try and you don't get it? Because oftentimes that's what we're really scared of, right? If I put myself out there, I'm gonna embarrass myself. People aren't gonna be around me and I'm gonna be all alone. So as you can start to pull out what the real fear is, maybe you don't feel wanted, maybe you don't feel valued, maybe you don't value yourself. Were you taught early on that you have nothing to offer? that no one cares what you have to say, that the people who succeed are only very self-oriented. Then what you got to do is you got to start being aware of the meaning you put on a situation in the situation. For instance, if you're trying to do something in your job, or potentially you're trying to find a romantic relationship, and maybe there's some things that are happening that aren't quite what you had in mind when you visualize this thing. If somebody doesn't call you, maybe you like them and they don't call you back, or maybe you had a really good date and they're like, I'm not interested, or maybe you go and you try something new in a job and it doesn't execute the way you thought it would. Do you put a meaning of I'm not good enough, or they don't like me, or it never works out for me? As you start to get clear on what meaning you're putting on the situation, you can start realizing that's where the misunderstanding is. That limited view, that old belief that I'm not good enough. Oh, this is because everyone always leaves me. Nothing ever works out. If you can realize that in the moment and say, oh, when I put this negative meaning of this neutral situation, I am abandoning myself. And when I abandon myself, I forfeit the opportunity to be authentically seen and be authentic within myself. The more and more you can start to see what you're doing in the moment, you can make a new choice. I don't know why this person acted that way. I'm not sure why this job situation didn't end up the way I wanted it to. And what I'm looking for is in the unknown. It's in the unpredictable. So I don't know what's going to happen. Potentially this experience not working out is creating room for the situation I'm really looking for. So as you start to really understand what is it about failure and what is it about trying and all the meanings in that, I think you'll be able to get more clear on what things are and shift those meanings in the moment. All right, so the last question for today's episode comes from SR, and the question is, reacting to circumstances and getting triggered, how can you calm yourself? And I actually clarified a little bit more just so I'd make sure to understand. And they clarified that they're having a hard time getting triggered by the SP who they're not in contact with, who was non-committal. Trying to be with myself and not chase, obsess, and let go of resentment. It's very important to understand what feeling you would have with that specific person. What would this relationship mean about you? The more you get clear on that, the more you can understand what you need in the moment. If you have a history of rejection, if you have a history of abandonment, starting to heal those wounds, starting to realize early on if you didn't get the attention, the affection, the connection you needed as a human being who was in development, if you didn't get that, we're not blaming the caregivers, but it is important for you to see that had nothing to do with you. That was what they were going through. That was what the tools they didn't have, but you needed. So the only insufficiency in that situation is not you. It's the caregiver's emotional capacity. But so often we take those interactions early on as an indicator of what we deserve, what we're used to, what we're familiar with. And then we project those on to the wall of reality, which if you've watched my last video, which I'm going to put in the description, you'll understand, oh, I'm not seeing the world as it is. I'm seeing the world of what I've been through and assuming or believing it to be true that the people are going to treat me that way too. So you find people who potentially are emotionally unavailable, non-committal. You have to start to understand, okay, if I didn't have an emotional available parent, am I emotionally able to receive? Because it's so unfamiliar. I had to actually look at that for myself to understand that I kept finding in my past people who were emotionally not available. And I really had to start looking to see, am I emotionally available to receive? Or am I in the habit of chasing and finding people who aren't quite interested is actually what was familiar. So I had to shift the way that I related to myself in a way that in terms of triggering, it's about what meaning you're attaching. A really important dynamic in this, especially when we're talking about specific people and relationships in general, is the energy of jealousy. And jealousy in mainstream is described as, oh, you get away from my man, or you're getting too close, or I'm threatened because this other person. That's only one tiny aspect. To zoom out, the energy of jealousy is when you want exclusive attention or affection from somebody and you're afraid you're not going to get it. You're afraid you're going to be abandoned. You're either anxious, you're suspicious, you're distrusting, or you start to compare. And anytime you're in that energy, the reason you care about it is because you're actually self-rejecting. You're more concerned with what that person's opinion is, or how they see you, or if they're going to be there so you'll feel better, than you are with yourself. So just the same as I left the seat I'm in right now to go over there where the camera is, you would see nothing. I ghosted myself. So the more you start to identify in the moment, you want that connection. Okay, I'm being suspicious. I'm being anxious, feeling really triggered. I'm distrusting, right? And they talked about resentment. Starting to look at, okay, am I standing up for myself? Am I expressing authentically what I need? Do I feel that I deserve and that I'm worth that need? Letting go of any ideas from the past, any beliefs or assumptions that you don't deserve that you have to earn that worth, that you have to fight for someone's attention. The more you let go of that dynamic, the more the dynamics you have in relationships can shift, and you can open the door to people who will emotionally be available to meet your needs and excited to meet your needs, right? And we're talking about consistency, loyalty, integrity. All of those different things are unique to each and every one of us. So what is it that you really need? You need to feel seen and need to feel appreciated. How could someone show up in your life to express that to you? So every time suspicion, distrust, anxiety, or comparison come up, when it has to do with you wanting this exclusive attention or affection, you've got to do the polarity of jealousy, which is duty. How can you take that energy that's leaking out and bring it back to yourself? That's about going for a walk, which we know that as your eyes go back and forth, automatically, it's actually draining the resource pool that your amygdala, which is your fear scanner, has access to. So if your fear scanner doesn't have as much gas in the tank, it's going to run out of gas. So you won't be as charged emotionally. Starting to realize, okay, I got to stay with myself. What do I need right now? Maybe you need some comfort. Maybe you need soothing. Maybe yoga. Maybe meditation. Maybe you go for a workout. Maybe you go for a run. Maybe you reach out to a friend and have a conversation. It's not about repressing. It's not about denying or gaslighting yourself, but it's about authentically realizing, oh, this is the time I usually leave myself. I'm going to stay with me this time, and I refuse to abandon myself in order to get the attention of somebody who's not emotionally available. And I'm not specifically saying that that is the case in your situation, but I'm trying to give a bigger picture so that hopefully this relates and you can get some wisdom out of this on how you can start bringing back the attention to you so you can get that reflected back in your reality, because you're worth it and you deserve it. Thank you all so much for your questions. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I love y'all, and I'll see you on the next one.